Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Bill. Today's video is going to be a video on Battlefield Magic. I'm in the core rulebook. We're looking at divine spells today, 3rd level spells today. We're looking over the spells that by themselves can already be effective in a big medieval combat. We're looking at spells that, if modified into objects or put onto weapons, could influence the combat. And just like the previous divine versions of these of the war spells that I've been making, we're going to look into the cleric spell list first and then the druid spell list second. There'll be a lot of overlap, but then there'll be some differences, as there always should be. So without further more, let's dive in. So the first spell is Animate Dead. Creates undead skeletons and zombies. That one can be a useful spell to raise a necromantic army to fight. So let's look to see how many dead it can raise in one casting. Now I know it requires a material component, so that's going to be its monetary limitation. But in a military setting, if your kingdom can get a hold of a boatload of them, then you're looking at a lot of enemies and fallen allies that could be turned into your army. So, raise dead. Animate dead is what I was looking for, not raise dead. Helps if I pay attention to what I was looking for. Animate dead. 1 standard action, onyx gem worth 25 gold per hit dice of the undead. So for a massive army, you're looking for a 25 of 50, 75 gold for regular soldiers. So the amount of undead you can create is no more than twice your caster level in hit dice. So if you were doing all 1 hit dice undead, at the time you can cast this, the minimum level to cast this would be level 5, is when you get access to 3rd level cleric spells. So you could create 10 zombies or skeletons in 1 casting. By the time you can do this, if you have a high enough wisdom score, you can do this twice in a day. So you can get 20 up there and running. You might only control 10, but if you give them an order and the orders to stay in there, well, they'll obey that order, and then you can create the next group. So that could allow you to create your army pretty quickly. You get a few clerics that can do that, or you give them a magical item that can do that, and you can have an undead army very fast. Bestow Curse is not very useful since it's a single target, unless you can give your army access to cast that as a 1-use item. Say, I give you this Bestow Curse oil. Smash this flask on a target. Now they'll have a 50% chance of losing each action every turn. They'd get a save, of course, but you know where I'm going with that. Blindness, deafness, same thing. Put that on a 1-use item. Smash this item onto them, and they're now blind or deafened. Blindness being my favorite, and then deafness being my favorite if you're hitting a spellcaster. Then Contagion. Contagion would only be useful if you had a strike team hitting an enemy's camp, fortification, whatever, and putting a very contagious disease on 1 or more of their soldiers to then spread through the camp. Continual Flame makes permanent heatless light. Not that useful in a military tactics, but useful if you're, say, the torches you're using around your camp can't catch things on fire. Create food and water can be great for feeding your army. Imagine having a few horns or a few barrels that can create food and water so many times per day. And that could just be based on how many you're trying to feed. Because for each level, it says you can feed 3 humans or 1 horse. So let's look at create food and water a little bit more in depth to get a more accurate view of it, and then how we could employ it in a war setting. If you were under siege, just having the ability to create food and water could make the difference on a make or break siege. Especially if they don't have means to destroy your walls. There's create water spell itself, create food and water. It creates enough food and water to sustain 3 humans or 1 horse per level for 24 hours. So, per casting, so assuming you get 2 castings at the beginning of this, you could sustain 30 people or 15 horses. Not 15. 5 horses, 10 horses, because you'd get 2 castings. So put that on a in an item that can generate food. Even if it was, say, an emergency item, this barrel can only ever do it 10 times. If it can do it 10 times and generate enough food and water to sustain 15 humanoids each time, that's 150 people you just fed. If your military in that area isn't that big, then you don't need to worry about that. If it is bigger than that, well, then you're under the rules of, can we stretch this? Some game masters will allow you to, others will not. If you stretch it, say I don't eat everything I need to sustain myself for 24 hours, I eat enough to sustain myself for half that, then now you've got double the amount of people you can feed before they start taking penalties from not having eaten enough or drank enough. If they're able to if you have a cleric handy or a druid handy that can cast create water, then you don't have to worry about the water aspect. Cure serious wounds. If it's put on an item or given to them as a potion, that can change how a battle's going. But most characters in the front line aren't going to be able to drink that while shoving their shields and poking things with their spears back and forth. Daylight, 60-foot radius of bright light. Implemented at night, that can be very mean in a good way for your side if you're using it against your enemies. If you put it on 1 or 2 shields in the front line, they activate it, even if it's a one-use item. That could turn a battle pretty quickly because now you've just blinded everybody that's in the front. And then you can make quicker work of them. Dispel magic. Dispel magic, if you use it as an area effect, could be useful if the enemy's using a lot of magic, or if you put that close to where their spellcasters are. Glyph of warding. That could be great to trap hallways or doors or such where you're under siege and you need to protect yourselves. Helping hand. Helping hand can't be that useful unless you're trying to sneak in a force to what you just found was like a hidden entrance. Inflict serious wounds could be useful if you're trying to drop somebody quickly. That has more than 1 or 2 hit dice normally for the military. But it's a single target, so it's not that useful unless you can hit an area for warfare combat. Invisibility purge dispels visibility within 5 feet per level, so 25-foot radius, I'm guessing. If that's the case, that can be useful if your enemy's using a strike force that's invisible. Locate object. That's only useful if you have something you're trying to locate, so it's not great in a war setting unless you know somebody's carrying a specific object and you don't know where their forces are. Then you can locate that object and get a better idea of where they're at. Magic circle against chaos, evil, good, law. It's 10-foot radius, 10 minutes per level. You put that on the middle of your front line, or the middle forces in your front line, 1 or 2 rows back from the front row, and they cast that. If you're fighting something that's using summoned creatures or something that's not natural to the material plane, you would gain benefits to your saves, benefits to your AC. Meld into stone is great for a strike force, is not good for an individual as a war spell. Obscure object. Masks object against scrying. Can be useful if you're getting scryed on a whole lot. So if you wanted to keep things on the hush-hush in a war game. Prayer. Let's see if prayer has a limit to how many it can affect. All allies and foes within 40-foot radius centered on you. So it's close, but it's not super close. You'd have to get close to the melee combat for it to be effective. It'll last 1 round per level, but it gives all your allies +1 to their attack rolls, luck bonus, and damage rolls and saves and skill checks, while your foes get a minus on the same checks, -1. So that could be very useful on boosting your side. And then from there, you can take that and really hammer home on the enemy. If you have a few clerics spread across your forces doing that, your enemies will be suffering a good deal. Protection from energy absorbs 12 points per level of damage from one kind of energy. That is great when you know that your enemy's throwing fire at you or lightning or something like that. But usually you don't get a chance to utilize that. And that's usually a single target, so that wouldn't benefit you in a war setting unless you could apply it to all your soldiers at once. Remove curse, frees object or person from a curse. Remove disease, cures all diseases affecting them. Searing light, ray deals 1d8 per 2 levels damage, more against undead. So that would be your weapon to take out undead soldiers. Other than that, you have anything else that's cleric related, channel areas and such like that. But I believe Searing Light's a single target, so that'd be your only downside. You'd want to target something massively destructive or harder to deal with out of the enemy's forces with that. Speak with the dead. Corpses answer 1 question per 2 levels. I've always had a hard time using Speak with the Dead and having good success as a player. So that one is what it is. Sometimes the corpse actually has good information, other times it's not as much. Stone shape. Sculpt stone into any shape. Cast that on a wall. You could pretty much collapse a wall onto creatures. Cast it on the ceiling. You could drop a ceiling on them. You can all of a sudden create a pit and reshape a hallway. It's very useful. It's limited on the amount of distance, but it's very useful. Summon monster 3. Now you get elementals. So now elementals can add a good amount of chaos to the battle. Summon earth elemental, have it meld with stone, go in there, grab somebody's ankles and pull them into the earth, and then do it again and again and again. You can all of a sudden start controlling how much the enemy can maneuver and such. Water breathing, that's good for your strike force because now they can get from point A to point B if there's water involved. If your army's involved, you need a means to apply that to your whole group of soldiers. So you're going to need potions of water breathing for everybody. Water walk. Subject treads on the water as if it's solid. So where water breathing just allows you to breathe, if you want to transport your armor and stuff across or ride your horse across, you need water walk. And that, I believe, is only subjected to one creature at a time. Let me look that up. One creature per level. So you could get 5 creatures. You don't directly contact the surface. Your feet hover an inch above it. You can use this across molten lava, but you still take heat damage for being near it. You can use that to purge somebody from being underwater. It says it'll move them 60 feet towards the surface every turn, but allows you to traverse mud, oil, snow, quicksand, running water, ice, and lava. So you cast that on 1 horse per level, and the horses can take 2 people across at a time. It'll last 10 minutes per level, so you could use a few horses to transport your whole army across the water. That one could be very useful as a tactic to move your army from one point to another. Wind wall deflects arrows, small creatures, and gases. But how high or how big is the wind wall? Wind wall. Wall up to 10 feet per level long and 5 feet per level high. So 10 feet per level long, 50 feet at the start of being able to cast this. But you can place it anywhere 100 feet plus 10 feet per your level. So you don't have to be close to where you're putting this. You have to be sort of close, but not real close. So at the beginning you can do this. You can do it at 150 feet. And it'd be 50 feet long and up to 25 feet high. It lasts 1 round per level. So it doesn't last for more than half a minute, 5 rounds. But if the enemies are targeting your front line with a bunch of archers, you throw a few wind walls up. Now the archers are going to have a hard time hitting you. Any ranged weapon that passes through the wall has a 30% miss chance. So you've just reduced the effectiveness of the range attack that was coming against you originally from however many we're going to hit as the 100% down by to 70% instead. So that can preserve your forces' strength and hit points to make them a little bit more deadly. Add that to a ship, and all of a sudden, it's hard to fire onto the ship. Let's go into the Druid spells, because that was it of the clerics. 3rd level Druid spells. Call lightning. Calls down lightning bolt, 3d6 per bolt from the sky. That can be very useful. You're now striking the enemy forces at different points. How big is a lightning bolt? Is it a 5-foot square? Let's look that up. Call lightning. Range is 100 feet plus 10 feet per level, so no different than the wind wall range. One or more 30-foot long vertical lines of lightning. So it's 30 foot tall. The spell lasts 1 minute per level. It's a 5 foot wide, so it could hit one target in a 5 foot square, or if you put it between the squares, you could hit 4 targets. I don't know. I'd probably give them a slightly bigger bonus to their save, like +1 or +2, for being between the bolt. Only does 3d6 electrical damage, which isn't a bad thing for a military spell. Use a standard action to call a bolt. You can call a total number of bolts equal to your caster level, maximum of 10 bolts for the casting of this spell. The spell stays in effect for 10 minutes per level till you use all those bolts. So, if you're outdoors in a stormy area, each bolt will do 3d10 points of electrical damage instead of 3d6. So, it does more damage in a stormy area. At higher levels, you can create that stormy environment and then use that. So that's very useful. But you would get 5 bolts at the time you can cast this, so you get 5 strikes on the enemy. If you're putting it in a very dense shield wall, attacking their shield wall that's very densely packed, you could devastate a good chunk of the shield wall, if not most of the shield wall. And that's just with one casting of it. Contagion, same as earlier. Cure moderate wounds, same as earlier. Daylight, same as earlier. Diminished plants reduces size or blights the growth of normal plants. If you were raging a different type of warfare, more of a guerrilla warfare situation, you could go into the enemy's crop farms, crop plantations, and destroy their plants with this. Dominate animal. You could use that on somebody's horse before it begins charging. That would be very hilarious and could benefit you greatly, especially when you have it charge into their allies' line. Magic Fang Greater. Wouldn't be that useful in a military situation unless you were fighting things that had damage reduction. Meld into stone. Already talked about it. Neutralize poison. Plant growth. Plant growth is the opposite of the diminished plants. Essentially, it makes your harvest more bountiful. Quench extinguishes fires. You could use that to, if you're at night and your force can see okay in the night, hobbits, elves, and such, you could use that on the enemy's torches and such, and light sources, and now they are, for the most part, blinded, or at least at a disadvantage for a few turns. Okay, so remove disease. Sleet storm. Let's look that up. Sleet storm. Battlefield range, 40 feet plus 40 feet per caster level. So 5, you're looking at 600 feet at the time you can cast it. It's a cylinder. Wherever you pick its destination, it's 40 foot radius and 20 foot high. So that's a good section of forces you can hit with that. Driving sleet blocks all eyesight, even dark vision within it, and causes the ground in the area to be icy. Creatures can walk within or through the area of sleet at half normal speed with a DC of 10 acrobatics check. Failure means it can't move in that round, while failure by 5 or more means that it falls. The sleet extinguishes torches and small fires. The spell only remains in effect for 1 round per level, so 5 rounds at the beginning of casting this, or when you can get this. But as you get more levels, that can last a lot longer. So that can be useful. It won't do a lot of damage, but it hampers their movement and their sight. So as a military spell, that could be very useful. Give your druid a scroll of that to use in the war, or a couple of scrolls of that to use in the war, and they can really hamper the enemy's movement before the battle begins. Especially if they're all on the road moving towards your all's destination. Snare creates a magical booby trap. That could be useful in guerrilla type situations. Speak with plants. That can let you know if something's come by recently. If it's in an area where there's not a whole lot of animals, you could check to see if anything's been by, and you could assume that it's the enemy's forces. But never just assume. Try to verify. Speak with some animals too. Spike growth creates an area. Take 1d4 damage, may be slowed. So let's look up spike growth. Spike growth. Medium range, 100 feet plus 10 feet per level. Area, 20 foot, 1 20-foot square per level. Okay, so you get 5 of those. Duration's 1 hour per level. Any ground covering vegetation in the spell's area becomes very hard and sharply pointed without changing its appearance. In areas of bare earth, roots and rootlets act in the same way. Typically, spike growth can be cast in any outdoor setting except open water, ice, heavy snow, sandy desert, or bare stone. Any creature moving on foot into or through the spell's area takes 1d4 points of piercing damage for each 5 feet of movement through the spiked area. Any creature taking damage from the spell must also succeed a reflex save or suffer injuries to its feet and legs that slow its land speed by half. The speed penalty lasts for 24 hours or until the injured creature can receive a cure spell. Or you can spend 10 minutes with a heal check and dress the wounds. So you put a few of these, it lasts 1 hour per level, so it lasts 5 hours. So if you get an hour before daylight and you know the combat's going to begin at daylight, you can cast that at where you know the front lines are going to be, or just towards the enemy's encampment more, where the front line's going to be, and let them walk through that to begin. And now they're slowed, they've taken some damage, weaken them a little bit. Maybe they can't keep up with the maneuvers because some of them are slowed. That can be very mean. That could be very useful. Stone shape, talked about it. Summon Nature's Ally. You don't really gain anything massively beneficial from Summon Nature's Ally 3, like you do Summon Monster 3. Water breathing, Wind Wall. Okay, so that's all the divine spells. So now that we've dived into the 3rd level divine spells, next is the 4th level arcane and the 4th level divine. As we go up, you're seeing more and more spells that are already built for it, as well as some things that we can get creative. Once we've hit level 6, I'll go back into other books like the Advanced Player's Guide and the Ultimate Magic Guide and review their spells up to level 3. I can't forget to include the Occult Guide as well. And then once we've had a good stacking of that, I'll review everything and come up with anything new that we can stack upon themselves to really, really emphasize the difference between a medieval combat and a medieval fantasy combat where magic can be thrown around and utilized all the time. Well, until we meet again,